Hello, everyone. OCO. I'm Michael Painter. Chichalagi. I'm an enrolled member of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. I'm also a senior program officer at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Welcome to this conversation about COVID-19 and Indigenous people in the United States and frankly, in North America at large. We have a terrific group of Indigenous entrepreneurs and leaders with us today. Edgar, Crystal, Nick, and Eric. This is really going to be a wonderful, terrific conversation. I'm very excited about it. Thanks so much to the Skull Foundation for inviting us all to have this platform, to have this conversation. And I want to point out that our Skull Foundation colleague, Claire Wathen, I think is on the call. So hello, Claire. I'm glad you could join us. Before we get started, I wanted to pause just for a moment and send out love to all of you, to everyone, really everyone in the entire world, as we're all going through this pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. All of us have lost something. All of us are grieving. Many of us are experiencing catastrophic losses. And as we see every single day, the events are unfolding. So it's important for us to pause and respect our loss, that loss, and each of our hearts. I know all the speakers, all of our hearts go out to everyone and to each other. However, in the midst of this loss and our grieving, there is still joy and there is healing. There's a social media thing happening around. I'm not sure if you've seen it. It's all over North America. Dancing, Indigenous dancing, social media connection, powwows, things like that. But there's especially one that caught our eye. It's Indigenous girls doing a jingle dance, which is a healing dance to help all of us heal. And we picked out one dancer. Her name is, she's an 11-year-old. Her name is Shyla Tutusis. She's from the Thunder Child First Nation in Saskatchewan. We wanted her to open our session for us. So here it goes. I'm going to play her post.
Hello, Tensei. My name is Charlotte Tutusis, and I am a jingle dress dancer from Thunder Child First Nation. Today, I am offering a virtual sidestep healing dance for all the sickness in the world, aka coronavirus. Thank you for joining me. I hope that I inspired you in a good way. I just want to encourage everyone to be safe and keep praying for the world.
So thanks to Shyla. Seeing Shyla dance reminded me of a quote from a book I really enjoy. It's by Jonathan Lear. It's called Radical Hope, Ethics in the Face of Cultural Devastation. Lear is writing about the Crow Nation's courage and radical rethinking of what courage and hope is and means in the face of the crushing onslaught of colonization. Basically talking about redefining courage. And what he says is, it's one thing to dance as though nothing has happened. It's another to acknowledge that something singularly awful has happened, the collapse of happenings, and then decide to dance. So with that, let's head on to our conversation. I mentioned I'm from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and our foundation is a large foundation in the United States. We work with people anywhere we can find them around the United States and the world to help build a healthy, more equitable future for everyone living in the United States. We focus intensely on helping people generate and build health equity so everyone has that fair and just opportunity to live a healthy life. And that means that we care deeply about Indigenous communities across the United States. So today we have a terrific group of Indigenous entrepreneur leaders, as I said. Most of them were Skoll World Forum Fellows. I don't think Edgar was, but Edgar was an amazing plenary speaker in Oxford last year, so we've included him. I wanted, before I hand it over to you guys to introduce yourselves, I want to, folks on the audience, I know you're going to have questions, and when you do, you'll see the Q&A, the question button at the bottom of your screen. Just go ahead and submit your questions there, and we'll get them and we'll get to them. You can start right now, and we're collecting them, and hopefully we'll pivot it in the last half of the call and get to your questions. So on to our speakers. Crystal, you want to go first? Introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Crystal Echohawk. I'm a citizen of the Pawnee Nation of Oklahoma and Kickahawkee Band, and I'm the executive director of Illuminative.
Who's next? Who wants to go?
Again, Hoppin. Hamadaki Nick Tilson, Amachapi, Chunke, Washington, Chuzapalo. This is Nick Tilson. I'm the president and CEO of the NDN Collective. And I'm calling in here from God's country, right here on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, part of the Oglala Lakota Nation.
Happy to jump in. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Edgar Villanueva. I'm an enrolled citizen of the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina. I'm speaking with you today from my home in Brooklyn, New York. I serve as the Senior Vice President at the Schott Foundation for Public Education, as well as the founder of the Decolonizing Wealth Project.
Eric.
Anin Bujuga Kinawia. Good morning, my relatives. My name is Eric Broad. I'm a physician, and I'm currently calling in from my office at the hospital at Oregon Health and Science University in Portland, Oregon.
Great, thanks everybody. So let's just jump right in here. I'm just going to throw a couple of questions out to the group, and you guys can go around the horn and just quick reactions, or however long you want to spend on it. But it's sort of building on that sort of hope theme from Lear's quote. I just want from each of you, we're going through this incredibly painful time, both at society at large, around the world, and then specifically in Indigenous communities. What is your highest hope as we go through this for Indigenous people? And then the flip of that, what's your worst fear, your most major concern?
Ladies first.
Nick, go ahead. A. What is my biggest hope? I think my biggest hope is that this will be our finest hour as Native peoples, and that we will remind ourselves of how strong and resilient we are, how innovative, all of these things, I think, our own power, how we're just going to stand in our own power and our leadership, and not only take care of our people and our communities, but where we can also be really thinking about our larger, community of humanity and how I think there's going to be connections and bonds hopefully forged. And so that's my biggest hope. I think my biggest fear is about the invisibility of Native peoples. And, as we look at, the economic responses and, obviously the public health medical responses, that is my deepest fear, is that already as Native peoples, we are challenged by huge issues around invisibility and erasure in society, which is what our research has really shown. And that already was a major issue, and it fuels bias and racism and a lot of different things. And so in a moment like this, in the midst of the pandemic, really invisibility becomes an issue of life or death.
Mm-hmm. Who else? Anybody want to grab that?
I can jump in. I think my biggest hope is this is about a pivot. I think that the reality of this situation is we've been living in this unsustainable financial system, unsustainable economy, unsustainable approach that's not regenerative for human beings. It's not regenerative for Mother Earth, and in many ways, this is a result of that unsustainable approach. And so it requires all of us as humanity to shift in these moments. We know that the past model has left out Indigenous people, that economies and countries have been built on white supremacy and on the backs of Indigenous people and African American people and Latinx folks. And so this is an opportunity to shift towards a more equitable future, for all of us, and understanding that even in these moments, that we have a huge opportunity that is before us. Are we going to bail out the existing system that is in place? Or are we going to build a new one? And so I think there's an opportunity here. So my biggest hope is that we're stronger from this, and that also it allows us to achieve many of the things that our organizations, our communities, our tribes, our nations have set out to achieve before this was happening, and to because we're not just doing it for ourselves, but we believe that moving towards a more regenerative based economy and system is better for all people and Mother Earth. In the second half of the question was the biggest fear. And my biggest fear is that we don't. My biggest fear is that Indigenous people are left unseen in this. Everybody has this struggle, and that Indigenous people continue to be unseen in this situation. That there's a lack of investment that continue to go to our people. That the health crises that exist in our communities continue to stay the same, and then we don't pivot. And so that's my biggest fear, is that that our partners and folks out there, that they don't see Indigenous people as essential for solving the world's problems, when I feel like we are, and we have a lot to contribute. And so my biggest fear, that's one of my biggest fears. And then just the other one is really about, it's about the threat of this disease to our elders, and the correlation that, average age of Indigenous speakers, about 71, 72 years old. That's how I know that's the age on Pine Ridge here. Well, that's the exact demographic that are in highest at risk in this situation. And so there's a huge threat to protecting our elders and the preservation, protection, and revitalization of Indigenous languages too. So that's something to me that I'm thinking a lot about during this time as well.
Yeah, I worry about the elders very much. Yeah. Edgar or Eric, you guys?
I think from my perspective, my greatest hope for this is that new ways of leadership and new leaders are brought to the forefront of how we as humanity solve our problems and solve our challenges with everybody in mind. Kind of echoing what Nick said, but we can't continue on this path and and keep choosing the same leaders with the same ideas over and over. And I think that my greatest hope for this is that people will rise up, people whose leadership will be recognized potentially from, different vantage points and perspectives that will bring a richness to the entire world in a way that's different than the way things are going right now. I think my greatest fear at this moment is that Indigenous people in North America stand to be burdened gravely by this compared to other communities. Indian country, as far as like health resources and other resources, is already like overtaxed and overstretched. And I think that in this time, we stand to lose way more people and to suffer the greatest in North America from this, just given the trends that we're seeing right now. That's my greatest fear.
Yeah.
I'll add, I think that you all have shared hopes and shared fears as well. I have been thinking about just the conversation as people are looking towards solutions, and those ideas that are coming from what I think of as an Indigenous worldview, are our way of life and the way that we see that we're inherently connected. And I think this crisis is bringing, it's creating space for a different way of seeing human rights, right? And so my hope is for Indigenous people is that we do get that visibility and a recognition that our worldview is the path out of this mess. We've always known we are resilient people. We have survived pandemics through the generations, and genocide and horrific traumas in our community, but we're still here. And I think there's something really special, unique about that, that I hope, we get to share with the world. And there's a major shift from an extractive, exploitive economy to a new way of figuring out how we thrive as folks who are in this 21st century, inherently interdependent upon each other. And I think my fear is that, hopefully we survive all of this to be here to lead that way. I am gravely concerned about how vulnerable our communities already were before this pandemic, with many communities having a lack of access to safe water, a lack of access to healthy and fresh foods, a lack of access to high quality medical care. And so I know the folks on this call have already been working around the clock to move resources and support to our communities who are already marginalized by government support, marginalized by philanthropy, and many of those who control access to power and resources. So my fear is that in all of this, with so many needs being brought to the forefront, that we will get pushed to the bottom. Because if anything, for me, this pandemic, this moment of crisis has really exposed the inequalities in our system in a way that are super concerning. So that's my fear, but I'm also hopeful because I know that we're going to make it through this. We always do.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to all of you. There's so many ways to go. A part of me wants to pick up on that thing about meaning and Indigenous people helping us all sort of find meaning in what we're going through. But I think instead, let's hold that. Let's go to the immediate sort of need question. And I want to start, Eric, with you as a physician on the front line out in Oregon. Like, what are you seeing? What are the sort of in the healthcare system? What are you seeing that? And just comment on the immediate need from the healthcare provider professional perspective in Indian country. What can you share?
Well, I think just speaking generally right now, we have a workforce challenge or like a workforce crisis. Even within the larger hospital systems, like how we're trying to train people up from what may be their normal scope of practice to being able to do things that they did during training and or for a few years out of training. I'm thinking like people who normally see people in clinics to transition to being acute care providers, or people who are acute care providers transitioning into doing more critical care and ICU level care. The workforce demands and challenges, kind of categorically, Indian country or not, is a big issue right now. Like, we do not have, especially if providers start getting sick, it's very concerning being able to maintain a workforce 24 hours a day, not just during daytime hours, but also nighttime hours becoming a big issue. When you think about like Indian country, the provider vacancies in our region are pretty significant. And so if you already have decreased access to care at baseline, when you have a surge of illnesses or critical patients, et cetera, you already have a system which is not ready and is not able to take care of the needs of people. And that's going to result in increased morbidity and increased mortality. I think the other element that's been noticeable here is that we do not, in Indian country, do not have the same access to testing for COVID-19 and the virus. Things are a lot more limited. And then even having the basic personal protective equipment has also become an issue almost from day one.
Crystal, Nick, Edgar, do you guys want to add something from like the not the healthcare professional, but sort of the community need sort of angle? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I mean, I think I just got off the phone with my aunt, you know, and a citizen of Pawnee Nation, and, you know, our tribe has laid off the majority of its workforce, both economic development, but also tribal programs. And, you know, most of our people work at minimum wage or just above minimum wage. So they were already struggling, and then to be laid off, you know, is a huge issue. And really talking with my aunt that, you know, some of our elders, their monthly income is $400 and $600, you know, and they might be relying on relatives who kind of contribute to that maybe now can't. And so to me, you know, I'm deeply worried because, you know, to Eric's point, the testing is just almost non-existent in our communities. And I think IHS, you know, here in Pawnee, there was a story of an Oto woman who got bounced between IHS and an urgent care and was misdiagnosed several times before she was finally diagnosed with COVID-19 and her suffering, right? So I worry about, you know, the lack of testing that's not going on in our communities, but the economic impact. Literally every tribe in the country has had to shut down its you know, all its economic enterprises. And are those economic enterprises, from gaming to our business, different businesses that our different tribes operate, that's what funds core services for our people. And so with all of those shut down, that is revenue that, you know, tribes are barely able to kind of continue on with some really critical services for our people. So that economic impact is being felt everywhere. And even though, you know, I think last looking at, you know, I think we have maybe about 230 cases that have been so far, you know, caught in the IHS system, you know, I'm sure there's a lot more. But I think the most immediate thing we're going to start to see is this economic impact. And I think it's something we really need to be mobilizing around and paying very close attention to.
Yeah, I can add to that too. I think, you know, you look at already overwhelmed tribes and tribal leaders, right? There's, you know, we were just on the call yesterday, and there's a good report going around that was prepared by Burton Warrington, breaking down the funding opportunities that exist for Native communities. And although that the bill is actually, the latest bill is a good bill, it includes a lot of opportunities for Indigenous communities and tribal communities. Those tribal communities positioning themselves to take most advantage of those resources. Some of them will come directly to the, you know, to the tribes and into the organizations, but many of them you have to apply for. And many of the tribal leaders and the people on the ground are dealing with, you know, people constantly coming to their house, people, you know, dealing with immediate things in there that, you know, worrying about how those tribes are going to be able to pivot take most advantage of what's before them is really, really important. And then you take all the existing health problems that already exist, right? When you look at diabetes complications and you look at the need for those services that many people are not being able to access. And then you layer that with systemic work that has been existing in any country for a long time. I mean, we are on the front lines of fighting the KXL pipeline up here in South Dakota. And guess what? The pipeline companies that we're fighting have not decided and have not made a decision to slow down the construction of man camps and in the building of this pipeline. In fact, Alberta, the Alberta, Canada just financed a new $1 billion loan the other day to TransCanada. And so we're in the situation where we're going to be having to fight these pipelines on the front line and continuing our existing work in the landscape that we're in today. And therefore, the risk that comes with that. And so that we have to be careful of how the extractive industries and those trying to destroy and erode Indigenous people's rights are also using this opportunity to be able to move their agendas forward. The amount of anti-protest laws and things that we've seen passed while this is happening in this country right now. I mean, there is a battle for the future of this nation, and so we have to stay diligent. And so I think that tribal communities are dealing so much with all of those pressures, and are just like every single tribal leader I've talked to and community leader is being pulled in so many directions. And so it's how we balance that of responding to the immediate needs, planning for the future, and then continuing the work that's there. So those are some of the stuff that I'm seeing.
Thanks. Thank you. Hey, Edgar, we're getting some good questions in from folks, and I don't know if you wanted to comment on that, and if you did, you should, but then I have a question I'm going to toss to you from the audience, whichever way you want to go.
I'll just be really brief. I think on top of the issues that have been shared, a lot of my work is with nonprofits, and which the nonprofit sector being the largest employer in the country. In times of crisis in urban settings, Native Americans often turn to these trusted institutions, folks who are living off reservation. And these organizations are being hit hard. And we know that, before the crisis, 15% of our folks were unemployed. We don't even know what that number is now. We have a huge number of homeless relatives. So in urban centers, folks are also trying to figure out, how do we provide shelter, food, emergency assistance? How do we keep our staff employed? So that's just another need that I'm hearing through my work.
Great. So I am gonna bring this question to you, Edgar. Sorry, you have to do double duty here. So the question is, and it's kind of builds on what you were just talking about. It's like, what are the ways to navigate the tensions between private foundations and tribal governments, while we're also respecting tribal sovereignty, and then at the same time acknowledging that tribal governments may not have the resources they need to deal with this challenge that they're facing, all the multifaceted nature of it?
Oh God, that's a complicated question, and I know my co-panelists will have something to add to it. I know what's happening in philanthropy. I critique philanthropy a lot. I have to say, in this moment, I've been pleasantly surprised at how quickly philanthropy is organizing itself to respond. And so I just want to acknowledge that. And I will say that, however, in the urgency to respond, it's very easy to not operationalize equity in how we're responding. And so we're quickly moving in a way that often moves money to who we know, right? And so, as Nick and Crystal have said earlier, our community, our organizations, our tribal nonprofits are really invisible, and so are left out often of these emergency response efforts from philanthropy. And then we absolutely have a gap in relationship building that has already happened and cannot be accelerated probably in this moment, because tribes are busy trying to take care of our communities. They don't have the time and right now to spend in building the relationships necessary often to get that money from philanthropy. So the quick response to that, what I'm saying to funders, is to go to Native-led intermediaries like Indian Collective, like Illuminative, like Decolonizing Wealth, where we have those relationships in place now. We are positioned to move money, and we have to move with a spirit of fear. So we are in a crisis moment. We have to put aside all of the way that we typically do business and find, understand what the needs are and trust those who are on the front lines of moving those resources. Crystal, you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, and just to, again, really reiterate, this is the time to lean into partners like, Edgar just highlighted, and to really look at how those intermediaries not only can make resources flow, but also make introductions. But I think, this is a time, where on the ground, like our tribal governments in many ways we have to make sure they have a seat at the table as we're thinking about moving resources. And so if there's anyone that wants to get a hold of a tribe and look at how they want to work for a tribe, call us as well. And there's ways we can set up introductions with NCAI and a lot of others who have those really close relationships, because I think, for good reasons, oftentimes tribes, they've never dealt with philanthropy. There's no relationships there. So, it's kind of hard to cold call somebody and say, hey, I'm going to come help you. But I think that, again, intermediaries can really help foster introductions, really kind of help to think about what's a great way to really be of service and be a partner to a tribal government as well.
I can add to that comment a little bit, and I put some comments in the chat box here. This is something Indian Collective has been actively working on, and our biggest thing was we know that many philanthropies have hot and cold relationship with Indian country, and some, as much as Indian country doesn't know how to interact with philanthropy doesn't know how to interact with Indian country. And so doing this in a crisis situation, probably not the greatest idea to foster new relationships. So the way that Indian Collective currently does, we made a couple decisions in our strategy on this particular subject. One, we decided not to abandon any of our existing grant-making programs or organizing efforts at all. We deemed all of our efforts as necessary and essential. Whether it be on the ground frontline organizing work or supporting our grant-making program like the Indian Changemaker Fellowship Program or like our Community Renewable Energy Grant Program. But then we leaned on our funders, who we already in relationship with, who already have those deep relationships with, and say, hey, here's a strategy that we're going to be able to support to get resources directly to folks on the ground. And it's going to look different in different communities, depending on what the dynamic is there. So in some communities, where they have the director of the tribal director of emergency management is staffed up, they have an emergency management plan in place, then yes, we'll partner with that person. In another place where a tribe doesn't have that, but they have a high capacity nonprofit that's supporting them, then we'll support them there. To us, we're basically agnostic, whether it be tribes or nonprofit organizations. What we have to be able to do is meet the diversity of the needs and the uniqueness of place in those communities. And so we were able to lean on some of our philanthropic partners, and we launched a goal of having a $10 million goal for this fund, and we've raised about $1.5 million or so in the past week and a half. And we really haven't announced this to Indian country yet, because part of the reason why is because I want to make sure that we actually have resources to be able to deploy before we announce things, because it's also about managing expectations. And I think that's one of the biggest things with working with tribal leaders and Native communities is the management of those expectations too. And so being able to say, here, when we roll this out, we already have money in the bank to move money quickly. And so we'll be making that announcement of that fund within the next week at the absolute latest, maybe even less, maybe even in the next couple of days.
Great, thank you. A couple questions. I wanted to go to Crystal and Eric, I'm sort of pulling on this thread, and there's a question in the queue along these lines too about the visibility, invisibility issue. That obviously it's a background problem all the time, and it's, as you said earlier, Crystal, it's particularly acute now. And then Eric, you have, in addition to being a physician, you're also an entrepreneur with an effort to use storytelling to sort of highlight indigenous health professionals and tell that story, make them more visible. what are practical ways to sort of address this invisibility issue, you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we really, from a number of different ways. I mean, there's been very little media coverage of what's happening in Indian country. I think, Navajo is starting to see some coverage. I think it was on the front page of the LA Times the other day, but really, I mean, very limited coverage. So we really need to be organizing and really pressing to make sure that these stories are being covered. These are important stories that we need to uplift. And I think we really need to look at how we're really working with tribes and Native nonprofits and communities to really build their power around strategic communications. Really, we have to be just putting on full blast what is happening in our communities, right? And in terms of the impact and our needs, but also people need to hear about the innovative ways that we are fighting COVID-19, right? And there's the example of Lummi up in the Northwest and what they've been able to do with their medical system up there that's actually sort of innovative and was outpacing others, right? So we really need to tackle that issue because, our research found that nearly 80% of Americans know little to nothing about us. I mean, we are just, you look across the board, we are literally non-existence in the consciousness of Americans. And that's very dangerous, right? And you also see what little people do know is often nothing more than toxic stereotypes and kind of these false narratives about, natives don't pay taxes, right? And we just get all these free government benefits and checks. And there's actually a whole narrative now with this stimulus package and the $10 billion earmarked for Indian country. You've got, someone from InfoWars out there putting on blast that why are we giving Native Americans all this money when they already get all this free money anyways, and sort of really playing into and fueling those really dangerous false narratives and stereotypes about what is actually in there, which actually has to do with our treaty rights, our status vis-a-vis the federal government and their federal trust responsibility. But the fact is that Americans didn't ever learn this in school. So it's more important now more than ever that we really are amplifying what is the truth, right? And fighting back against that, because that can be incredibly dangerous, right? And it also kind of plays in, I think, this lack of, our lack of our visibility. For example, the CDC has still not distributed the original $40 million earmarked for Indian country that was approved over 3 weeks ago, right? Navajo Nation, where they have the largest outbreak in Indian country, still has not seen any of those CDC resources. So if we don't fight back and really ensure that there is really good coverage and that we're amplifying what is happening, it's going to cost Native lives, and we cannot stand for that.
I think despite one of the first cases outside of the focus of Seattle and the Pacific Northwest being in a tribal community here in Oregon, that really wasn't covered much. And the fact that the transmission and the focus of that was a tribal basketball tournament where hundreds, if not thousands of people went there. And so to be at some level misinformed and not have the resources, despite being on like the very front end of the experience here in the Pacific Northwest, has been challenging. I will say that almost a month ago, the Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board, which is owned and operated by the 43 tribes of the Pacific Northwest, like Crystal mentioned, they became immediate players in this, and they became immediate leaders in that they realized that we would not be receiving the same amount of attention or resources for information. And so they launched a really aggressive COVID-19 in Indian country campaign to ensure that all the 43 tribes and urban Indian people in this region, as well as beyond, are informed about COVID-19 and its impacts. Now, two things that are a little bit along the misinformation line that I want to clear up. So if you're American Indian Alaska Native, because your family has survived epidemics and or pandemics in the past, does not make you immune to COVID-19. That's not true. Also, it's being put out there that that in order to be immune from COVID-19, a treatment is to burn cedar in your house. And because your relatives survived the pandemic and epidemic, and if you burn cedar in your house, you will be immune, and then you don't have to abide by social distancing. That is also not true. If you are African American, you can get COVID-19, and if you are Black, you can get COVID-19. So those are like 4 like misinformation campaigns that I don't know who is doing, but it is not true. Okay. Like if you're American Indian, you're susceptible to COVID-19. And if you're Black or African American, you are also susceptible.
Sort of raise a really interesting point, Eric, about misinformation and how to protect Indigenous people from misinformation. That's something to really think about. We're getting some questions about mental health, and it prompted me because coming into the call, Nick, I was looking at I think a blog post on the Indian Collective site on spiritual fortitude, and I was really struck by that, and it sort of dovetails with Eric's point about people thinking, you want people to use traditional practices and, whatever kind to strengthen spirits and help everyone with that part of our existence get through this challenge. But you have to parse it with, not making sure that it's not making you think you're immune from the actual sort of biological disease thing. But could you talk a little bit about the spiritual angle and how we're thinking about mental health challenges and spiritual challenges in Indian country?
Yeah, absolutely. I know there was some folks that had problem hearing me before. Hopefully they can hear me a little bit better now. I think the volume is turned up. I think the reality is in moments like this, our culture and our ceremonies need to adapt. And they always have throughout history. I'll give an example. There was right off the hill down here in Porcupine, it's my home community, there was a gathering of medicine men, medicine women, spiritual leaders that came together to pray this weekend. And they came together to share a prayer. But people practice social distancing at that ceremony. So normally it's a custom, everybody goes up, hugs each other, shakes each other's hand, people practice social distancing there. That was that was a cultural, norm that changed. Also, the smoking of the chanupa or the peace pipe, right? You smoke the chanupa, but then you add it to the next person. Well, in some of these ceremonies, what we started doing was we come together, we bring our own chanupa, we smoke that, we don't pass it around. We smoke it to ourselves, but we all pray together collectively. These are ways to understand of us practicing the social distancing and implementing the science that exists out there while still practicing our ceremonies and our culture, and those types of things are really important. And I think that many tribes and tribal leaders are at that stage. I know that there's spiritual leaders on Pine Ridge who are talking about postponing certain ceremonies because of this, and adjusting those ceremonies because of that. Because we know that we can't stop doing those things because those contribute to our mental well-being and to our spiritual connection between the stars and Mother Earth. And so in these moments, it is that spirituality, it is that belief, that woichala, our belief in that is going to help get us through those things and help us get us through those times. And to be quite honest, not just get us through. It's the spiritual ceremonies and what we are going to get from the ancestors during this time that we're going to get messages that are going to help us not only get through this, but be able to be able to live long, powerful lives beyond this. And so it's really important to keep that spiritual connection going during this time, adapt where we need to, but implement that, because the spiritual advice and the wisdom from our ancestors is going to help us in this unprecedented time. And so, and I think that there's a lot of traditional medicines. I think that some of the narratives about about shelter in places, you can't go outside. That's not true. You can go outside, go onto the land. The medicines, Mother Earth is teething right now, and the plants are coming up, and there's many of the knowledge that exists in our communities to be able to harvest some of those traditional medicines that are coming. And so my personal belief, and I think that a belief about the changing of the seasons, in Lakota culture, we say when the thunders come back and the wakia, when they come back to the people, Well, that time is here now. Those storms are coming back to the people. They're going to bring medicine to the people. This is not, to second what Eric says, this is not to say that we don't think that if we just pray, that we're going to pray this away. We have to, in almost all indigenous cultures, there's this goal and role about meeting the ancestors halfway. So we have to be able to, implement those ceremonies, but also implement social distancing, and we have to meet the Creator halfway so that the Creator can do its job in helping us defeat this sickness together. And so I think all of these things are collectively contribute to our overall physical health, mental health, spiritual health, and well-being.
Thanks.
And I'd like to tag on to that really quickly. Again, just another example, my aunt said today, just because of where the stars are aligned, this is the day that the Pawnee people, we need to be praying for our seeds, right? And because we're trying to bring back those foods and those medicines. And so, but they're having to navigate some things today and get a little bit creative because of social distancing and keep everyone safe, but it's still going to happen. And I think, the other part of our mental health, and I think the medicine is so important, is help for our community. How are we helping each other, right? And I have found so much comfort in medicine, good medicine, and trying to figure out, how do I give back? How can I be of service, right? And how can I help, my Pawnee people, my Indian community here in kind of the greater Tulsa, northeastern Oklahoma, thinking nationally, but also just how I'm checking on friends, and just the things that we're having to adapt and do everything over technology. But I think just really finding those ways to be of service, because that is part of our traditional core values, no matter what nation you come from, right? And I think sometimes we get away from that because we get so busy with the day-to-day demands, and all of our lives have just been completely, thrown up in the air, and everything's different. But it's this opportunity out of all of this for that connection, right? And for us to really remember what our core values are and how are we going to take care of each other right now. And I think that's where we're going to find our strength.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
I'd just like to answer the question from the chat about the community gardens and seating in a time of social distancing. So up at Oregon Health and Science University, we have 14 very large traditional garden beds that we have students and scholars from across the country. They bring their traditional plants and foods with them so that we can kind of grow them throughout the year. Right now, unless you're essential personnel, you can't come. And so normally we have 30 people who, Indigenous folks across campus and students who we plant our things together. But last weekend, it was just the two physicians who were seeing patients that morning. We planted the garden for everybody, and we documented and we created little stories and videos that we shared amongst our group. So even though they weren't there, we showed what we did and talked about what we did as a group, as a small community. And the realization is that in times of forced removal, in times of genocide, in times of epidemics or pandemics in our communities before, some people have taken the responsibility to go out and plant those foods that we have. And the foods that we planted were the ancestors of the foods that were planted during those times. And so to us, there's a way to draw some strength from that. And that's how we did it practically here.
Mm-hmm. Eric, great. I'm glad you asked about that, because I was just about to as well. So good. There's a question in here about this, and this dovetails with what you were just saying, Eric, about posting the videos. And so they were asking about you guys to comment on this, the Facebook group, social distance powwow. I'm a member of that. I mean, did you guys know about that? What do you think about it? What's your reaction?
It's amazing. It's so beautiful, and it's just exploded. And I know, when I really am kind of really struggling, it's been so lovely to just kind of scroll through and just see, what people are posting and sharing. And it's just gorgeous to see, and the innovation, right? Of still, like, we're having a powwow this Saturday in Grand Entry, and just, damn, Indian people are so innovative. I love it in the way that we're using technology. I think So many people are so worried. So many of our Native people don't necessarily, participate in the formal economy, right? I mean, they're artists, they're making things. The powwow trail, right, is such an important economic point for so many of our people, right? And so for all of those powwows to be canceled, the ripple effects, I've received so many notes from artists that are really struggling because they can't make ends meet. But if you go on to Social Distancing Powwow, there's actually an entire vendors page, right, where you can still shop, you can really still support those different artists. So to the organizers, I say hats off. I love it. It's really exciting.
Edgar, I wanted to come back to you about sort of a decolonization analysis of the things as where we are right now. Like, what does it mean as we're going through this crisis to sort of still think about decolonizing wealth, decolonizing power? I mean, it seems really relevant, but it also seems like we have all these other urgent priorities. We just got to get these things done. Like, how are you thinking about that analysis, that critique these days?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking a lot about it because in this moment where we are is a result of colonization in my mind. In our economic system in the U.S., capitalism is absolutely, it's been fueled by this force through the generations of hoarding resources. Everything for me is through the lens of colonization, decolonization. So even the fact that I can't find toilet paper anywhere right now and people are hoarding toilet paper, I'm like, that is sort of our mindset, especially in the US, of hoarding resources, not sharing, approaching everything we do from an individualistic point of view, right? Folks who are not practicing social distance because they don't care about their relatives. These are all parts of our culture in the US especially that are the way that the default way of seeing the world, that we're not connected, that, mindsets of scarcity. And so I think now the opportunity as we kind of began this conversation is to really examine what are the opportunities to change that way of being, that way of existing around, extraction, hoarding, fear, scarcity. Those are all the dynamics of colonization that have resulted in so much trauma, not just in indigenous communities, but in all communities, right? It's not serving any of us well. And what we're seeing in this moment is that communities that have been safeguarded from some of that trauma because of capitalism are now feeling that experience, right? Coronavirus, COVID-19 is impacting everyone across race, across class, and our economy has been shaken, and folks who typically don't go to bed at night worrying about wealth and finances are now having to, are now holding those concerns. And so I hope that for me, it's an opportunity that we just reimagine, what do we really need to get by, right? Like, when do we what is the sense of having enough as people? How do we put others before ourselves to make sure that we, our neighbors have enough? I just found out yesterday that my neighbor lost her job, right? And it's like, just reassuring her, like, if you need food, I've got some extra cans of tuna over here. We're going to get through this, right? So it's really, all about bringing us back to our common humanity, the concept of all my relations. And money is a big part of that, because money is what got us into this mess. Money is a tool that has been used to divide and separate and create these mindsets of us versus them, the haves versus the have-nots. And in this moment, like, let's figure out a new way to change and move out of this moment, understanding that we are all connected to each other and to this earth.
Thank you. That was awesome. So we're in the last 5 minutes, and I want to give you guys a chance to do your choice. You can sort of give your thoughts on a call to action to Indigenous people or to broader society on behalf of Indigenous people. I also wanted to go back and ask that question again that we had at the top, where we were talking about radically rethinking hope and courage. Sort of that theme sort of moved through this whole conversation about Indigenous people, to generalize, have have a unique outlook and a unique relation and a unique understanding of our relationship with living and non-living things and creation. So they're given the root cause of the problem we're facing, we could ask of Indigenous people to help us all understand that and to help us make meaning out of this terrible moment. But I guess the question is it fair, given all the challenges, is it fair to ask Indigenous people to sort of, do that too? So you're probably my answer.
I'm going to say no, right? I mean, this isn't about us saving the world at this moment, right? But I think there's really about a lot of core values and other things. And, Nick has been so eloquent, as has Edgar, and, Eric as well, right? But I mean, this is, this falls into a lot of tropes about mystical, magical Indians are now going to go save everyone. And you've seen so many stories being posted of non-Native people just parachuting into Native communities right now for those types of reasons, right? And really tribal communities just really having to be really protective and closing their borders. So, I think we need to be cautious about that, but I think there are a lot to learn about our core values that the world can learn, but I would say right now, the biggest call to action is be a partner in making what's happening in Indian country visible. That is the call to action that I have for everyone on this. And, for Indian country itself, we need to get organized, right? How do we get organized and ensure that we are amplifying all of these stories, all of these needs, all this impact? This is a time for Indian country to stand up and stand together, right? And really be organized about how we do that. And we need our allies to step up and really be partners, right? And really listen to our lead about how, we need what we need, but also we also have Native-led solutions, right? And so it's being good allies means being good partners and listening. And so to me, that's sort of my call to action and hope for this.
Awesome, thank you. Who wants to go next? We're down to 2 minutes.
I can keep it short. This is Nick. I think the biggest call to action is to have a sense of urgency, and at the same time that responding and to keep thinking about change as opposed to charity, thinking about systems change, thinking about how we change the outcomes in our community, how we actually change the entire conditions in our communities because we're under this stress because of it. So I know it's hard to do that when you have all these things coming in, but my recommendation is for us to be thinking about systems change level and how we are continuing to challenge systems of white supremacy and power dynamics that exist in our communities so that we have more self-determination over our very future so that we can be the architects of our own future. And so I think thinking about those things in these moments is really important. And that will be my biggest call to action.
Awesome, thanks.
I'll just say that, support our self-determined way of doing our work and with a sense of urgency. I think that, you have several groups here on this call. We have other groups we can refer you to. This is a chance for us all. And it's not about charity, as Nick said. When we ask for resources, it's not about charity, it's about solidarity. We are offering a lifeline into your own humanity to be a part of giving so that you can find your own liberation from white supremacy. And so we hope that you take these resources to heart and join our efforts.
Awesome. Eric, last word.
More specifically, anybody who's watching this today, wherever you're at, try and identify or lean on what your gift to the world is, your gift to the community is, and just act on it. Do what you can today to make the world better. There's a lot of us who are facing some pretty significant challenges in the health care sector. And this is, like Edgar mentioned earlier, this is going to affect everyone, no matter if you're rich or poor, you have a bunch or you don't have anything. But what you can do today is recognize what your gift is and what your talent is and put it to use now.
Thank you. Each of you, you were amazing. So thank you so much. It was incredible. Really, really enjoyed it. And I hope our audience did as well. Thanks, audience. Thanks for joining us as well. Dona Daga Ahi. See you guys. Take care.
Okay.